Curutan. I'm really excited to introduce our next speaker, Bianca Curutan. She is an engineering manager at Stride, but continues to do mobile development on Android and iOS products. Although she is currently located in the Bay Area, she is from Canada, where she earned her bachelor's in math and engineering degrees with a focus on systems management and code generation research, respectively. Outside of work, Bianca is an active member of the tech community, particularly enjoys working with and mentoring students, early career professionals, and people newer to the tech space. Amazing. She is also a certified yoga and Lyra instructor and a circus enthusiast, so you can often find her at the studio. Welcome, Bianca. I'm so excited to hear from you, and I love your Women Who Code shirt, so I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you so much, Shauna. And hello, everyone. Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are. I hope you're all doing well today. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing your time with me today, especially after this long, amazing Women Who Code Connect recharge. But for now, together, let's talk about do's and don'ts of professional networking. So as Shauna mentioned, my name is Bianca Curutan. I am currently located in San Francisco, California, and I moved here for the same reason that many other folks in tech do, which is to work in a tech hub. As mentioned, I currently work at Stride. It's a company that makes it easier for independent workers to get their own quality, affordable benefits. And here I manage the growth team. It's a cross-functional team that focuses on brokerage customer growth. And right now, our aim is to reach new customers directly and through our partnerships by delivering interactive tools and experiences through our web and mobile offerings. So I thought it would be fun here to show you a sample of some of the work that I do outside of work. So as mentioned, I am an active member of the tech community. I've presented talks like this one, written articles and blog posts, and participated in research and panels, and done more as part of my involvement in the community and in my network. And so I understand that navigating the tech community and its professional networks can be challenging. As a borderline introvert, it's an area I feel like I've struggled with in the past, and especially early on in my career. And it's a skill set that I continuously strive to improve as I develop both personally and professionally. Oftentimes, I've learned that things that seem like they may be the right thing to do aren't always that. They don't always turn out to be so. And so I'm excited to speak with you today about this topic, provide helpful advice for what to do when building and maintaining your professional networks, and note some of the pitfalls to keep an eye out for. So we don't always tend to give networking its due time or attention, but there are so many benefits that can be gained when we use our networks well. And to give you a concrete example and kick it off with on the benefits of networking actually helped me find my current role at Stride. In short, a hiring manager at Stride had reached out to a mutual connection of ours to ask about my interests and to make an introduction. So, power of networking. But let's take a moment here and backtrack. The first question we may actually want to ask ourselves is, what even is networking and what does it involve? When we think of networks, we may think of this. While technically correct, this is, of course, not the type of networking we'll be talking about today. Networking, in our current context, is the action or process of interacting with others to exchange information and develop professional or social contacts. And professional networking involves building relationships with other professionals in our career fields and in other related fields. Now, that's a whole lot of words to define networking, and it doesn't really clarify what kind of interactions are intended, what information are we supposed to exchange, and really what defines a related field. And so I present to you our first do. Do develop your own understanding of networking. To some of us, networking may look like this. This is a good example, but it is a very stock photo looking, in-person, professional networking event with lots of strangers in suits with name tags and coffee. And let's be honest, this scenario may already be making some of us feel anxious or stressed. So let's take a look at our first don't. Don't stress out before you've even started. If situations like this make us feel socially anxious or awkward, know that we're not alone in that. Networking is hard for many of us, but stressing out about it makes a not so bad situation seem worse and more complicated than it has to be. But this don't is easier said than done, right? So let's keep that first do in mind. Do develop your own understanding of networking. Among other things, consider the information we strive to exchange and our intended types of interactions. So networking may look like this, but it may also look like this, where we're working and socializing with coworkers or friends, and can also look like this. Unsurprisingly, networking with others online has become more popular in the last couple of years due to the necessity of social distancing, but the willingness and the desire to continue to connect with other people. Now, I'd like to take a moment for you to consider this scenario. You're at a tech conference, solo, and other attendees seem to be surrounded by their friends and coworkers. As in-person events are starting to ramp up once more, we may find ourselves in this or similar situations very soon if it hasn't happened to you already. One tip is to break down larger social or networking goals into smaller ones, and don't be afraid to make the first move. For example, we can aim to bring ourselves to talk to at least one person in every session that we attend, even if it's just a quick, hey, or wow, this line is crazy, right? And you can see where the conversation leads from there. Another tip I have is to sit closer to the front of the room and or avoid leaving those spacer seats. You know, the ones I mean, sometimes in conferences or events or even in movie theaters, we like to leave those 1 to 2 seats between us and other folks. So we can aim to not do that, at least for a little while. Well, that's all well and good, whether we find ourselves in that situation professionally or personally, but otherwise, why would we even want to network in the first place? We network to build connections. This one may seem obvious, but I'd like you to note the use of the word build here. We network to make connections and build mutually beneficial relationships for our careers and the careers of those in our network. We network to share knowledge, whether it's asking for feedback or discussing our points of view. Networking helps us expand our knowledge base and allows us to see things from another perspective. It's also likely that there's someone in the group who's already been where we are today. And so this provides an opportunity to learn from them and to avoid some of the pitfalls that they may have experienced. We network to increase confidence. Regularly networking and pushing ourselves to talk to other people who we don't know helps to increase our confidence. This is an important trait in any career, whether it's online, in person, and everything in between. We network to improve visibility. Getting noticed and being recognized are some of the big benefits of networking. The improved visibility can help us to build our our reputations as knowledgeable, reliable, and supportive people as we offer useful info and tips to others who may need it. We're also likely to get more leads and referrals since we'll be the one who pops into other people's head when they need what we have to offer. We network to find opportunities. It's natural that networking will lead to opportunities. What we won't know, however, is when or how they will materialize. Whether it's a referral, a partnership, or a request, it's important for us to be ready to seize these opportunities when they come along. And of course, there are many other reasons to network that are not listed here. And so we come to our next scenario and a common reason for wanting to network: job hunting. So imagine this: you're looking for a new position and you reach out to old friends, former coworkers, and acquaintances and ask them to hire you for an open role at their company. Well, wait a moment. First, don't just ask for a job. It puts people on the spot, and especially if we haven't worked with them in a long while, if ever, and it can make people feel awkward or uncomfortable. So let's modify this situation a bit. You're looking for a new position and reach out to old friends, former coworkers, and acquaintances to ask for advice about an open role at their company. A tip in this case is do be upfront about why you're contacting them. It's totally fine to reach out to people to ask for help and advice. And in fact, I'd encourage it. But if we haven't spoken to that person in a while, just be upfront with why you're contacting them. So for example, if we know of an old high school friend who works at Fubar company and we want to learn more about the working culture there, we can just say so. We don't really need to reacquaint ourselves unless we are genuinely interested in reigniting that connection. But also, don't forget to do your own research. Let's say while job hunting, we see a recruiting post from a friend and want to ask them if they're hiring for a mid-level web engineering role. Before we do that, though, we should use the information that's already available to us. I actually see this one come up a lot because I regularly reach out to my networks to let them know about open roles at my company. So for posts like this, I recommend reading the whole post before firing off a message to your friend. You can check if the post includes a link or a list of available positions. And if it doesn't, but it includes the company name, then we can do a quick search for the company career page. And usually, mostly, that should have all the information that we need. And after all this, if we're still not sure which role would fit us best, then it's better to narrow it down to a few comparable roles before reaching out, rather than making someone go through a potentially long and extensive list for us. Another thing we may be tempted to do is ask someone to introduce us to anyone they know in some industry or some company. Similarly, we should look into things ourselves before asking for help. LinkedIn is a helpful tool for this since we're able to do an easy search for second or even third degree connections. And when we reach out to our first degree connection, so our friends or our coworkers, we can specify which people we'd like to be introduced to. I've actually heard another presenter mention that it's even better if we even write out the email for them. So that email can be super simple, but it should include some variation of a name, an intro, and why we're contacting them, or a call to action. Networking is meant to be a helpful tool, not a crutch. And we don't want to burden our connections with smaller tasks that we can easily do on our own. As a final note on this job hunting scenario, do ask before adding someone as a reference to your job application. This ensures that they can comfortably and confidently vouch for your skills, your experience, and your growth potential if someone asks them. So we've touched on this next part previously a bit, but now that we've uncovered the what and the why of networking, let's take a deeper dive into the who. Who should we network with? The first thing we want to think about is where we are. Consider where we are professionally, socially, intellectually, physically, and other attributes. Next, think about where we want to go. This may be a specific goal, such as leveling up to a staff software engineering position, Or it can be a dynamic goal, such as improving leadership and communication skills. Once we recognize our goals or our motivations or incentives or whatever we decide to call that last point, consider the people we know. That is, the people in our current network. Our current networks can include people we know from school. So think about students in our classes, our study buddies, maybe group members on certain projects or youth groups. It may include our workplaces. So consider our teams, our departments, our current and previous companies, and employee resource groups that we may be a part of. It can include the industries. And by industry, I don't just mean the tech industry, but we can take a deeper dive into those industries. And these may include like the internet industry, communications, and advertising, for example. Think about our activities or hobbies. Do you regularly attend yoga or dance classes? Are you a member of a gym or a book club or maybe a volunteer committee? What about the technologies we use? There are active communities globally and in many locales as well for iOS, Android, web, Python, and other technologies. Can consider our personal connections. So these may be our friends, our family, and acquaintances, or social or strangers connections. So you can imagine that tech conference scenario where you're gonna strike a conversation up with the person beside you, or maybe you're standing in line for coffee, or maybe you're on a flight, or maybe you are participating in our children's activities. And there's also geography, where we're physically located, and more. And this leads to our next do. Do build connections with people we already know, even and maybe especially our close friends and families. Some common concerns that may crop up with this, though, especially the latter part, is what will I owe them if they help me? Or what if other people think I'm getting preferred treatment from them? Something to be mindful of is that networking is intended to be a two-way street. And I scratch your back, you scratch mine kind of situation. And so it can be mutually beneficial for us to seize these opportunities, regardless of who helped us get there. This would help us get our foot in the door, and then we get the chance to prove ourselves. So yes, do build professional connections with people we already know. But don't feel that you're obligated to. Over the course of our careers and life in general, we'll meet with people of all different walks of life, and we'll empathize with some less than others. So don't feel that we're obligated to maintain or build up that professional connection with them if we aren't really inclined to. Coming back to our reference slide, let's think about the people we should know to help us reach where we want to go. These are the people we should aim to add to our networks, to meet and to build connections with. And of course, in addition to networking, there's everything else we still have to do to reach our goals. But that's not what we're focusing on today. Now that we're all convinced that networking is the way to go, how do we get started? Here are some examples to help us get started in no particular order. Update our resumes and portfolios. Update LinkedIn profiles and add connections. And on a related note, do include an introductory note with your LinkedIn connection requests. If it's obvious why you're sending a connection request, for example, to your teammates who you may interact with regularly, then go for it. But if you're reaching out to someone you've never formally met before, it's better to add a quick note to the connection request to let that person know who you are and why you'd like to connect with them. Otherwise, the other person is more likely to reject the request. And to be honest, I'm one of those people. Also, don't forget to follow up with them. Keep the conversation going with new questions and interests so that the professional relationship can evolve past that initial meeting point. And if we'd like, we can use those follow-ups to plan for a future meetup as well. Some other ways to help us get started are conduct industry research and stay up to date in our fields, prepare a 30-second elevator pitch, leverage our social media, create a list of questions and interests, attend conferences and events, and more, as there are countless ways to get started and get involved. Before we finish off this talk for today, I'd like to leave some final takeaways for you to think about. The right opportunities don't always come our way when we want them to. So do create your own opportunities by leveraging your network and using the tips and practices we talked about today. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Building a network isn't easy, and so we're bound to stumble from time to time, and that's okay. Know that we're not alone in this, that there are no dumb questions to ask, and that others may be facing similar social or professional challenges. And last but not least, do have fun. If we start to feel stressed or anxious in a networking situation, take a step back, relax, and just try to have fun with it. Have fun forming connections and allyships and inspiring others so that we may all rise together. Finally, and having ended on a positive note, here are some helpful resources for you, including a link to where to find the slides after the presentation. As a final footnote, if you're currently seeking your next opportunity, we are hiring here at Stride. But whether or not you are on the market, please feel free to reach out if you'd like to stay connected. And if you're using LinkedIn, then please don't forget to add that introductory note to your connection request. And thank you again for sharing your time today.
Thank you so much, Bianca. That was so great and so many helpful, very actionable pro tips that you shared. There's been a lot of action in the chat, and if you are open to taking some questions, I see that Nicole has a question on following up, which is a really good one. How soon do you follow up with new connections? I'm assuming if you don't hear back from them.
I'd say it depends. If it's a connection of someone you already know and you're just trying to connect with them via LinkedIn or other social media, then you may feel comfortable to follow up with them right away. However, if it's a cold reach out, I'd say about a week is a good number to wait for. It is possible that they may not have seen your request because some folks don't check LinkedIn regularly or perhaps don't receive the notification emails. So I think about a week is usually a good way to go. But there's no hard and fast rule on that.
Right. I feel like the important thing is following up at some point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Great. We have a question about how to keep up with your connections. So this is from Evie Toddy. Which would you suggest any tools to keep up with your connections? Do you have any kind of systematic way to do that?
That's a really great question. I think it would depend on our working styles. So some folks prefer to keep track and others may prefer to just let things happen naturally and see where things go. But of course, the challenge with that is if both folks drop the ball, then there's no connection that happens. Personally, I try to use Google Calendar. So I would either set a reminder for myself a few months from now, and then I'll see it when that month comes along to reach out to them again. Or, yeah, no, I think that's my preferred way. But then I do know some others who have other methods to do that. Another thing to be mindful of is, I don't remember the exact number, but I know due to social research, there is a certain number of people that as humans, we can be able to connect with in a meaningful way. So I don't know what that exact number is or if everyone's number is different, but that's something to keep in mind too, that at some point there is only a certain number of people we can maintain, in which case we need to start considering who would be the meaningful professional connections to maintain and who may just need to have less frequency with following up.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's
Mhm.
impossible to connect and maintain strong connections with every single person you've ever
Mhm.
interacted with in a professional capacity. So
Mhm. As
makes
much as we would like to.
oh, would love to just have that in my brain. um, this is a great question. Annie would like to know if there's any sort of expiration time that happens after an event, or if following up with someone, weeks later is weird. She says.
Mhm. That's a great question too. Personally, I don't find it strange. And if anything, I think, oh, wow, they remember me. So must have made an impression on them. So I don't think it's strange, especially if we include that intro request to just get the gears rolling, remind them where we may have previously met before. And then I believe from my observations and experience, no one would find it particularly offensive or weird if we reached out several weeks later, given the context of how we met. I think, especially in the community here that I've experienced with Women Who Code, everyone has been very open to new connections and maintaining that professional relationship. So hopefully that does seem to be your experiences as well.
Absolutely. I definitely would welcome anyone reaching out at any point, and there is no expiration date in my mind. So glad to hear your take. I'm seeing some responses to that number of meaningful connections that you were trying to think of, and there's a couple of people who are guessing between 100 and 150. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, so that makes it even more challenging because that is not just 150 professional connections, that's 150 people total. So definitely want to prioritize where we want to spend our time and effort.
Absolutely. Great. I'm seeing a lot of comments about how people wish that this was the first talk of the day and not one of the very last. So definitely a lot of people are inspired to network now.
Oh, I very much appreciate that feedback. Maybe we can make that happen, Sean.
Yeah, definitely. I see another question here is, can you talk about what following up after a successful connection looks like? What is the content of that follow-up to build and maintain relationships?
Oh, another great question.
Yeah.
I think when I think of follow-ups, I immediately think of an email or a LinkedIn message. I find as a medium of communication, that's a nice way to follow up with someone that's not so urgent or pressing so that they may address it in their own time or convenience. As for the content, you may not like this answer, but I feel like it depends on you and your personality and your style and what you're trying to convey. The reason I say that is think about, for example, recruiter messages that we may have received. Some recruiters are very straight to the point, like it's very structured and formal, whereas others try to make it more quirky with gifts or maybe a pun or two or jokes. So stylistically, it depends on each of us and how we want to present ourselves. And then content-wise, this refers back to one of the tips we reviewed in this presentation, where we want to present a question or a point of interest or a call to action to help encourage that person to respond back as well.
Yes, definitely giving people something to respond to or asking a question. Really great tip. Sabrina says, thank you and wonderful talk, Bianca. I have my first in-person conference coming up. What are some tips on how to open up a conversation with strangers at an event?
That can certainly be challenging. I find in some events more than others, that's especially challenging. There was one tip that was presented, which is to take the larger goal of meeting people and just trying to shrink it a little bit into more manageable chunks. So one suggestion was just say hi and how are you to someone without an agenda. Some folks open up right away, which is great. And some tend to end the conversation there, which is also great, but perhaps not someone will easily be able to continue the conversation with. Besides that general icebreaker, how is the weather type deal, another good way to do this if we are interested in talking to people is think about where we are. So for example, if we are at a session about designing for accessibility, then a really great icebreaker may be, oh, why are you interested in this talk today? Or what has your experience in this area been before? And in that case, we're not just striking up a conversation and opening up introductions. It also helps to ease that knowledge sharing aspect of networking as well.
Absolutely. I saw in the chat, I think one of my teammates actually shared. Anna says, I've made so many friends at conferences by asking people where they got their shoes. So while your opening line can and should relate to, what you're there for, you can also just start a conversation about anything and see where it goes.
Absolutely.
Great. I see so many thank yous. I know you've shared your links on the previous page. Is there anything else that you wanted to leave our audience with?
I guess just as a final note and reminder, this is a big topic to tackle, and it's not something I would expect or push on people to suddenly be experts in networking once they leave this talk. I'd say some advice here is do things at your own pace and at your own comfort level. Someone else may be comfortable just diving right into those networking conversations and in-person events and the whole shebang. But if your comfort level right now is just to start messaging people back on Slack, then that's a great first step. As long as we feel that we're making our own progress, then we don't need to compare ourselves to others.
That's great. And that's just great life lessons and tips as well. Thank you so much, Bianca. We will definitely schedule networking sessions earlier in the day so that we can have you back at our next conference. I see a lot of people in the chat are sharing their LinkedIn links. So I'm sure you can expect many, many people to connect with you. And thank you so much, Bianca. And I hope everyone has a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Thank you so